Okay, perfect. Good morning. So, can you all see my screen? Clearly visible, no gray blocking. Thank you. So, let's start today's class. And before we start today, I would like us to revise what we the concept we introduced last week. And last week we started talking about loops and why we need loops in our programs or in our code. And we describe loops as some kind of repetition, when you want to print so many lines, when you want to repeat the same line of code multiple times. So we can use loop. And we talked about the three different kind of loops that we have. The while loop, the do while loop, I think, and the for loop. We'll introduce the concept of the for loop today. And last week we discussed that why do we need these loops and what is the different functions of the loops that we are introducing to our code. And we also talk about the three main requirements, please, very important. The three main requirements that is required for any of the loops we are creating, any of the loops we are writing, either it's a while loop, a do while, or a for loop. We talk about the control variable. This is um I will say this is a container that it tells the computer how many times this line of code, this instruction should be repeated. That's just the simple description of what the control variable does. What is the control variable doing in our code? It is telling the computer how many times would the loop repeat within this program. And it must be initialized. It is compulsory. It is required. You have to initialize. And the second condition here, the second requirement here is the condition. And that's when we talk about a Boolean expression. That expression, what does it do? It involves the control variable. That is what tells the control. It tells the computer if the control variable and the condition is met or not. So we need a condition which helps us to check. It's checking on the control variable. It communicates with the control variable that we have created. And the last but not the least of the requirements is our modifier. And that is where we have to modify and we have to update the control variable. Why? Why do we have to do this? Why do we need to update or modify our control variable? Can anybody describe why? Why do you think so? Why do we have to control? Why do we have to modify or update the control variable? Any opinion, any suggestion why we have to do that? Okay. It is very, very important we update or we modify the control variable so as to what? So as not to create an infinite loop. We don't want a loop that will keep running because it's true and it will keep running and it could crash our system. It will crash our program. So what do we need? We need to modify. We need to control the control variable. We need to update the control variable. That's the word. We are updating the control variable. The moment we update that control variable, our condition will become false. And what happens? The loop stops. The loop stops once the condition is fulfilled. So any question on the three requirements that we have discussed? And last week we discussed the difference between why we have the while loop as the pre-test and why we have the do while as the post-test. What does the while loop does? The while loop checks the requirements before executing the body of the loop. So it could execute 0 or more times. So if the condition and the control variable is not involving, that is, if the condition is false, what happens? Then the while loop executes zero time. So it doesn't execute. And that's why we call it the pretest, because it checks if the condition is met or not before execution of the loop, the body of the loop. However, when we're talking about the do while loops, we are saying the post. So what happens in the post test? At least the code will run once before checking the condition. So the code, the body of the loop will execute once before checking the condition. And that's why we were talking last week on, we were talking about the different, the different position where we have these 3 requirements. So you can see in the while loop, we have it, the first requirement, which is our control variable, initializing our control variable, is at the top. Even before the loop, before the body of the loop, we declare our control variable. And within the body of the loop, immediately, what happens? We have to do what? We have to declare the condition. We have to state our Boolean condition. So we are stating our Boolean condition. And within the body of the loop, within the body, what should happen? Print this if this condition is met. What happens? We need to modify, we need to update the control variable so as not to have an infinite loop. That is for the while loop. But when we talk about the do while, what happens? Here, the syntax is, follows almost the same structure. However, there is a slight difference when we're talking about the do while. We also have to initialize. So what are we doing here? We're initializing our control variable. However, in the do while loop, we have our modifier. We are updating, we are modifying, and we are checking the condition. So, of course, the body of the loop runs at least one, before doing what? Before checking if the condition is met. And that's why we say the do while loop will execute at least one or more time, unlike the while loop. The while loop is 0 or more time. It may not if the condition is not met. But in the do while loop, it will execute at least one before checking if the condition is met or not. And that's the difference between the while and the do while loop. And that's why we call it this is pre-test. It actually check. It's testing. It's involving the control and the conditional statement are involving before executing the body of the loop. However, in the do while loop, no. It's a post. It first executes at least once before what? Before checking if the condition is met or not. Any question? Thumbs up if there's no question, and we can, we can start this topic. Thumbs up if there's no question. I'm not seeing any thumbs up. Oh, I didn't say there's a lot of question there. Okay, thank you, Abby. Any questions? Jackson. Okay. I think I have few people that have responded. There's no question. Please, if you have any question, you can interrupt me. You can use the chat. The purpose of this class, I will keep saying it, is to do what? Is to support, to assist you in understanding this concept. So feel free to ask any question in between the class. There is no wrong question in this class. So do we have our programming environments opened and ready to code? So I'm going to, oh, thank you. So I'm going to give about 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Let's set up our environment. And I want us to, I want us to do what I want us to illustrate. So I want us to illustrate the do while. We didn't do that last class. So I want us to illustrate the do while loop, how it works, what are the syntax, where are each of these requirements placed, like I just explained. Um, so we want to demonstrate using our programming environment, any environment of your choice. But for the class demonstration, don't forget we are using IntelliJ. And if you actually code, if you actually organize things the way I do, then good. So what do we want to do? We want to work on challenge 1. So you can find this in your course Canvas page. So you come to your modules, and in lesson 5, in lesson 5, lesson 5. I'm sorry, I think I had it already. Okay. So for lesson 5, we go to the lecture notes and in-class activities. And here you have the loop programming challenge 1 to 4. And we will be working on the first challenge, the challenge 1 for the do while loop. Don't forget, I emphasized this last week that each of these loops works slightly different, like we can see from the syntax, from the description. However, one of the loops will be more efficient depending on the problem we are solving. For this kind of problem, I think the for loop is more efficient. However, we can still use the while loop, the do while loop, but the most efficient loop for this kind of problem is the for loop. But let's use the do while loop just for class demonstration purpose. And if you have any question, let me know. So what's the problem? What do we have to do here? There are 5 people in the room. Besides yourself, you want to say hello to all of them. So besides yourself, there are 5 people in the room besides yourself. So with yourself, you're making 6. But for this specific program, we are only saying hello to 5 people. So what are we going to do? We are to print hello 5 times. Do we want to use the print new line statements? No, that's not the most efficient way to do this, because we can do this in just 2 or 3 lines of code. We're done, instead of having to write 5, 6 lines of code. And what happens after printing the hello to everyone, after saying hello to everyone, then you have to, we print, let's start the meeting, because that's the purpose. That's the purpose of why you're in the room itself. You're in the room, the people are gathered in the room for a specific meeting. So after saying hello, you want to tell these people, like, oh, then let's start the meeting. Let's start the meeting. So what are we printing here? We are printing 6 lines on our screen, and 5 saying hello to people. And the next line will be, let's start the meeting. How do we do this? We don't want to use the print statement 5 times. So we want to use loop, because we are repeating, the same line of code forward for 5 times. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to do. So if you organize things the way I organize things, so follow along with me. I need to create a new class. And what does this class say? I'm creating a new class because I want to organize my things in a more efficient way. So creating a new class, and I want to name my class Hello. Hello. Yeah. So what are we to open next? What are we to create next? So we have to open the main method. And I told you don't have to write everything. You can just say main. because we're using compilers that are very, very smart. What do I do first? Good practice, best practice is to use your comments so anybody can pick up your code and understand what has been done. What is the purpose? What is the purpose of this code? What problem are we solving? So we want to say hello. We want to say hello to 5 people in a meeting. That's the purpose. So when we're talking about the requirements, regardless of the kind of loops, if it's a do, if it's a while loop, if it's a do while loop, or if it's a for loop, these three requirements are very important. So what is the first requirement? We have to initialize the control variable. Initialize. I am missing high here. Okay, initialize the control variable. And how can we initialize this control variable? What do we want to do here? We want to count. So I'm just using counts. You can use anything. This is um, user defined variable. So you can use any name. I'm using count here. So I'm the amount of, so I want to, you can use anything to initialize your count. I need to emphasize it. However, whatever you initialize your control variable to determines how you do it, how you write your conditional statement. Don't forget, very important. So for this specific, you can initialize as 0, as 1, but you know you're iterating, you're looping 5 times. So I'm using 4 in this instance. So what happens next? I want to use do while loop to say hello to each person, in the meeting. So that's what I want to do. I want to use the do while loop to say hello to each person in the meeting. And don't forget, we have 5, excluding yourself. We have 5 people in that meeting. So what is the syntax for do? Don't forget, we use the word do. This is a reserved word in Java. You cannot use this to name any other variable. And what do we do here? We have to tell the compiler to do what? To repeat hello 5 times. And how to use our print statement just once, because that's what we want to do. We don't want to write the print statement 5 times. So, because this is what will happen if the condition is met. And how do we do this? Yeah, and so you write an L in cap lock. Don't forget our statement terminator, very, very important. And so here we have the so I'm going to ignore this for now. And what am I going to do? I want to move to the second requirement. Don't forget. The second requirement is always the why. And we have the second requirement is always the condition. So what is the condition here? Counts. Of course, we want to say when counts is what is less than 9. Because we already initialize our control variable as 4. And the control variable involves what? Involves the word, the condition. So here, it is very, very important we understand that our control variable determines how our condition will be structured, will be initialized, will be declared. So I know between 4 and 9 is about 5 iteration. I wanted to iterate 5 times, 5 times. So now this is the second, this is the second requirements. I don't want to forget that point. So I try to just make the comments. There's the condition that what that involves. Is everything okay? Not sure. Oh, I can you all hear me now? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to my internet. Thank you. Oh my God, this is terrible. Okay, my screen is visible now. Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you. Uh, okay, so let's continue. I'm sorry. We're almost done with the, yep, this is what we're working on. And I'm just going to enlarge it so we have it all together. The internet is messing up. So what happens? What is the third condition that we have to work on here? Um, so the third condition will be to update. So we have to update and modify the CV. And how do we update and modify? We use the increments. You cannot update using the increment, the augmented operator, or we can also use the initializing maybe your count plus one, different ways you can. The idea of updating the control variable or modifying the control variable is to change that control variable. So once the condition is not met, we will stop the loop and we will not have an infinite loop. So I'm sorry, yeah. So I'll just trace. Let's trace this code again. Um, before we continue. So what was the first thing we did? We actually initialized the control variable, and I emphasize that your control variable can be initialized to whatever value you want for the do while loop. However, how you initialize your control variable determines what your condition will be, how you write your condition statement. So, what is the second requirement? The second requirement is to have your condition, your Boolean expression. That will what? What does this do? This involves with the that will involve with the CV. That would involve the CV, which is our control variable. And the last requirement here is also to modify, to update that control variable that we have initialized. And don't forget, for the problem, we are say hello 5 times, and the last statement is what? To print the final statement, which is let's start the meeting. Oh God, it's terrible. System.house that prints. And what are we printing now? We're saying let's start the meeting. Statement terminator is very important. And don't forget, I like to have comments so I understand what I'm doing. This is the end of main. And this is my end of class. Why do I have it here? Because I did not put the comments. Yeah. Let's run it and see if we have our solution working. Okay, so we have it like, what does this do? This comes in and say, hey, don't forget, the do while does what? It does what? It prints at least one. So it execute the body of the loop execute at least one. and comes to the what? And comes to the condition. Is 4 less than 9? Yes. Don't forget, we have our what? Our increments operator here. What does this do? This is changing the value of our accounts per iteration. So it's coming, the count is now 4 within the container, and it comes again, is 5, is 5, becomes 5, is 5 less than 9? Yes. Is 6 less than 9? Yes, it's print. Is 7 less than 9? It's print. 8 less than 9? It's print. 9, is 9 less than 9? No. So what happens? It jumps out of the loop. The condition is not met. And does what? And prints this new line of code, which is outside of the loops. And let's start the meeting. Any question? Do you have any question? I'm sorry about the internet. Uh, any question on this demonstration? So how do we test? How can we test if this do while loop is working perfectly? How can we test it? How? Any opinion? You can use the chat. Unmute yourself. How can we test it? Such a kind of question. So here I can just come here and put my control my control variable. Let's put it as 10 and see what happens. So let me run it and see. Is it going to do the same? Is it going to print my hello 5 times? No. Why? Because the condition. However, don't forget, in the do loop, in the do while loop, what happens? It prints at least once before checking if the condition is met, if the condition is true or false. So it executes once before checking if this condition is met or not. So of course, 10 is not less than 9. So what happens? The loops ends immediately. And that's what, and print the next line of statement. So you can always, how you initialize your control variable and how you declare your Boolean expression tells us, having the number of iteration that will be performed within this specific loop. So if I put 1, for instance, as my count, that's my control variable, this will, 1 is less than 9, 2 is less than 9, 3 is less than 9, 4 is less than 9. So it's gonna print more hello until this condition is numbered. That's why I said for the specific problem, probably the do while loop is not the most efficient. However, we will talk about the for loop now, and you will see the difference between this type of loops, the 3 types of loop that we have. Any question on the do while loop demonstration? Okay. Thumbs up if there's no question, and we can start and the discussion on the for loop. I'm sorry about the internet thing. One of those things in teach. So let's go to the one. So what do you understand about for loop? When do we use for loop? Have anyone ever used for loop here in the class? Can you give us a simple description of when we use the for loop? Okay, I think we have one here. Anybody willing to share? Okay, I guess not. So let's talk about the for loop. When we talk about the for loop, why did I say the for loop is the most efficient? for that specific problem, because the for loop is the most efficient loop to use when you know the number, the exact number of iteration. So when we know the exact number of time we want to repeat, don't forget, I use the word exact. So when we know the exact number of times we need to repeat one or more line of code, then the best and the most efficient loop to use is the for loop. When we know the exact, I'm emphasizing it, we know the exact number of time we are iterating. We know the number of times we are looping. We know the number of times we're driving around. I have to drive around 5 times before my baby sleeps. So I have to drive around 3 times before my baby sleeps. We are certain, we are sure we have to loop exact number of time. I'm printing hello world just 5 times because I'm greeting 5 people. That's level of you are sure this is the number of times you have to iterate. Then we use the for loop. And what let's look at the syntax of the for loop. In the for loop, we have all the 3 requirements in a single line. We initialize our control variable here. This is where we're telling the compiler where the loop should start, the number of time the loop will iterate, and we're putting our condition, which it involves with the control variable, and to execute the body of the loop. And here we also put our modifier. We are modifying when we are updating the control variable. That's the increments. It could be increments, it could be, but it's majorly increment because we know the number of time we are iterating. It could be decrement if you initialize your control variable downward. So majorly because we know it's always an increment kind of modifier. So in this kind of loop, we have all the 3 requirements within a single line. Don't forget, each of these requirements, for the first requirement, there is a semicolon. Second requirement, there is a semicolon. However, for the last requirement, there is no semicolon. If you put a semicolon here, then this will be a logic error. It is very important. These are the kind of questions you will see in your exam. We will intentionally put a semicolon here and say, what will be the outputs? No, you don't have to check any outputs because you're sure this will be what? An error, a logic error. And we will check that in a few minutes. So let's compare. So here we're comparing. You can see for the for loop, we have we declaring our control variable, the condition, and of course modifying and updating our control variable in a single line. This is similar, to when we talk about the while loop. However, they are in different location, but it is similar, it's similar structure, similar kind of assembling one this before the other. Unlike when we talk about the do while loop, where we have our initialization of the control variable first, and we have our increments. We're modifying, we're updating the control variable before the condition statement, before a Boolean expression. Similar to when we have the while loop as well. The while loop and the for loop works. The structure is similar. So we have the initialization, and within we have the condition, and within the body of the loop, we have our increments. We have our increments, our modifier, we are updating the control variable. Any question about a different position, we have Any question about a different position? We have this. Isn't it a loop that's set to repeat specific? Yeah, sorry, I didn't read the charts. Very correct, Brunas. Very correct. So we have an exact, a specific number of time each will iterate. So, terms of review, no questions on the comparison between the different, the three kind of loops that we have. Thumbs up if there is no question. If you have a question, please use the chat or unmute yourself. Are we clear on this? Oh, sorry. I want us to go through the segment one after the other. So, what is this telling us? This is just a flowchart diagram of how the for loop execute. So, of course, we're initializing. I told you the for loop works similarly to the while loop. What does it do? It checks immediately. It is not a post test. So it's checking, is the condition met or not? So it's involving the control variable, and the conditional variable is involving before going to the body of the loop, before executing the body of the loop. So if the condition is met, what happens? If it's true, it executes the body of the loop. It's what? The increments, iterates, going back to the loop, until the condition is false. And once the condition is false, it's what? It breaks out of the loop immediately. It stops. The loop stops immediately. It breaks out of the loop immediately and execute the other line of code outside the loop. So we discussed about like I said, the functional is equivalent to the while loop structure. It's equivalent. It's the same thing, the same structure with the while loop, because the while loop is also checking if the condition is met before executing the body of the loop. Any question on that? Perfect. Same question. So, this is similar to what we have in the conditional statement. The curly braces could be optional when we have just one line of code to be executed if the condition is met for follow. The curly braces, what is the curly braces doing? That's it's telling us, oh, it's indenting. It's telling us this line of code is related to the specific function. This, the group of code is related to the specific function. It's doing the specific function. However, if we have just one line of statement, we do not need the curly brace. This curly brace could be omitted if we have one line of instruction following the for loop. So I'm just going to skip this, and let's go back to our programming environments, and what are we going to do? What do you want us to do? I want us to use the same example we used for the do while loop, which I emphasize this example is most efficient when we use the for loop. We can do this most efficiently when we use the for loop. So let's try this with the for loop. What should we do here? If you organize the same way I organize, I come here, I create another Java class, because these are the same, within the same lesson 5. I have this demonstration within lesson 5. And here I'm going to name it LO4 because I'm checking for loop here. What do? I open my main method. Don't forget, you don't have to write everything. You are most intelligent compiler. So what do? I try to add comments, like I said, to understand the line of code. So here I'm also saying the purpose is to say hello to each person in the meeting. So for the for loop, what happens here? For, don't forget, reserved word in Java, you cannot use it. I'm still using the same naming convention, counts for. So my counts should be less than 9. Don't forget, semicolon at the end of each, except for the last requirements. And that will be my increments plus plus. I don't have to, I do not have to put this semicolon at the end of the last requirements. So what happened? I'm opening my curly braces. And what am I doing within this curly braces? It could be omitted if I have one line of code. One line of code. It could be. It's your decision. So I'm going to repeat hello. I want to print hello 5 times. That's what I want to do. And I'm using my system that have that print to say, I terminate my system. And this is I don't have to put this curly braces, but I just want to. It's not, it's not, it's not required when I have just one line of code. So this is the end of my for loop here, and this is what the end of my main method, and I have the end of my class. However, there is another statement after the loop. What is the statement? I want to print let's start the meeting, the final statement. What is this final statement saying? Let's start the meeting. Let's start the meeting. Oh my God, whatever I don't. Let's start the meeting is not H. Yeah. So let's see. Let's trace the code that we've written. So don't forget for loop, everything has to be in a single line, just one line. We're declaring our control variable because our condition, and also we're modifying, we are updating the control variable in just one single line. So let's run and see what happens. Perfect. You can see in fewer, this is done in fewer lines, unlike when we have the do while loops, because we have the number of iteration, the exact number of time we want our code to do us to iterate. So we know it 5 times. I'm only to say hello to 5 people. I'm only saying hello to 5 people. So I'm sure of what I want to do. So I initialize, unlike when I have the do while loop, that I have so many line of code. So I know I'm printing exactly the number of times I want my loop to be repeated. Any question on this? Thumbs up if you understand, and we are on the same page with the different kind of loops we have discussed. Only having, okay, more people. I need more thumbs up to say we are clear on this. If you have a question, please interrupt me. So That being said, it's just the same thing we've done. We're initializing, um, and it's just the same thing. We're just tracing the code. Don't forget, once you put it, you have to be careful. You have to be careful. Once you put a semicolon here, this is a logic error. This is a logic error, and they are common mistakes people make when writing the for loop. No, we are not terminating the for loop statements. Um, so let's say, so let's talk about these recommendations for the different kind of loops and why and when we should use them. So for the for loop, we have to use the for loop when we know the number of repetition, the number of time we want the loop to repeat itself. So for instance, we just print hello 5 times, or we are lift off, we are printing count 1 to 10 before lift off. We know the exact the instruction, we know the exact number of time we are repeating. We know the exact number of time we are repeating. And the while loop is always used when we do not, when we do not know the number of time. When we do not know the number of time we want to repeat. So we just want it until that specific condition is met and is false. And the same thing for the do while. For the do while, we only use it when we just want to print at least once until the condition is false. So it could be used to replace the while loop, because the while loop does not print anything once the condition is false. It only breaks out of the loop entirely. However, the do while loop print at least once, because it's a post test. It's print at least one before checking if the condition is met or not. So if when the condition is false, the do while loop would print the statements, the statement we have in the body of the loop. Any questions on this, the different scenario we can use any of the loops? Okay, good. Let's move on to the last few topic concepts before we round up today's class. And we are talking about jump statements. When we talk about jump statement, what are we saying? What are jump statements? What are jump statements? Any idea from, I'm sure we've used the break statements, and we will see more of the continuous statements in this class. What are jump statements? What do they do? Any opinion? You can use the chat, unmute yourself. What are jump statements? What are jump statements? Okay. If no opinion, then let's get to it. Jump statements are statements that we use to control the flow of the code, the flow of the program. The statement we use to control, we're controlling the flow. And we have 3 main jump statements we will be introducing in this course: the break statement, the continuous statement, and the return statement. For the return statement, we will discuss that in lesson 7. In lesson 7, when we are talking about user-defined methods, we will discuss the return statement. But for this specific class, we will talk about the jump statement and the control statement. And of course, we already discussed the jump statement. Can you remember in our switch? In our switch statement, we use the jump. We use the break statement, right? Can you remember that? In our switch statements, in lesson 4, when we're talking about the conditional statement in our switch, what are we doing? It helps us to do what? What does the jump statement does? It helps us to immediately, immediately end that body of loop. It immediately ends and execute the next line of code outside the loop. The jump statement ends immediately and does what? And execute code outside the next line of code outside the body of the loop. That's what the break statement does. It just breaks the loop. It ends the loop immediately. Unlike the continue statement. So we're gonna say example. Let's talk about the continue statement. What does the continue statement does? This is different from the break statement. The continue statement only jumps out of the current iteration. It jumps out and proceed with the next iteration. And we will see example of that to understand this concept better. So let's say this example for the break statement. What happens? You have this code in the code inspection folder. You can always go through it and copy and paste it to your programming environment and see how it works. So what are we saying here? We're saying int high equals to 0. And we're not saying y. We're using the y statement here, the while loops. High, what is the condition we're giving it? If 0 is less than 10, print high. So it prints 1. It prints 0 is less than 10, so it prints 0. If 0, now don't forget, we have modify. We have updates the control variable. So the control variable becomes 1. So if 1 less than 10, print this. It does print it because 1 is less than 10. So it prints high, 1. That will be the output that we have. So also it updates and I now becomes 2. If 2 less than 10, print high. It prints 2 again because of course 2 is less than 10. This if condition is not met yet. So it keeps iterating. If 3, we have updates the variable to 3 now. Is 3 now the value of high less than 10? Yes, 3 is less than 10. However, if don't forget it checks the next line of code and say because it's within the same loop, it's within the same body of loop. And now it's checking if I equals 4. Now because I is now 4, I is equivalent to 4. What happens? Breaks. Just end the loops immediately. End it immediately. So it's not checking for other iteration again. And that's why we have our output as 0, 1, 2, 3. Because 3 is not equivalent to 4. It's only when 4 equivalent to 4, this loops breaks out. Do you understand this example? Thumbs up if you understand what I just illustrated. Yes. Only Antonio understand this. Happy. Thank you guys. So this is what the break statement does. It's immediately stop. Finally, it stopped the loop entirely. Once the compiler, the condition is met and the compiler sees the break statements. However, let's look at the continue. Let's look at the continue. What happens in the continue? Say, if high. Now our high is 4. Equals 4, equivalent to 4. Continue. Continue does what? It only break out of that specific iteration. It doesn't stop the loop entirely. So that's why we have the loops goes back to check. Now I is less, now 4 is less than 10. And it prints what? 5. We've modified the value of our high to 5. So it prints the new value of high. Because this is a 4. Don't forget. And what happened next? 5 is being checked again. Is 5 less than 10? Yes. 5 plus 1. So 5 plus 1. So 5 plus, that's 5 plus 1. Now 6. So it prints the value of high, which is 6 now. Is 6 less than 10? Yes. 6 plus, that's 6 plus 1. That's 7. It prints the value 7. Is 7 less than 10? Yes. Then updates. 7 plus 1. Now 8. Is 8 less than 10? Is 10 less than 10? No. If the condition is now 10 less than or equals to 10, then it will print 10. But here we are saying less than. Is 10 less than 10? No. So the loop stops immediately. The condition is now false. 10 is not less than 10. And what happens? It goes to the next line of code and prints end of continual example. Any question? Can you differentiate between the break and the continue statement now? This does not stop the entire loop. It only stops a specific, the current iteration. It is not stopping the entire loop. It's only stopping the current iteration and move to the next iteration for the continue statements. Any question? Thumbs up if there's no question. So we can differentiate between the loop, the break statement, and the continue statement. And when we see that in our exam, we can always, oh, this is how the break will work. This is how the continue statement will work. Okay, that being said, it's the same example. So you can, using the while loop in this scenario. Here it's using the for loop, here it's using the while loop. It's almost the same scenario that will happen. And a question. Okay, if no question before, I think we have 10 minutes. Okay, we can end the class. However, I would like you to do this on your own. Use the for loop for challenge 2 on your own. We have, we have specific instruction. Use a loop to count down from 10 until lift off. So it's specific. We're counting from 10 to 1 or 10 to 0 until lift off. So this is a specific number of time the loops we iterate, the loops we go. So you can try this with the for loop as well on your own. And I think let me see if I have any other thing I want. Yes. One important thing I want to discuss before we end the class today. I have gone through your exam, your first exam. I was able to do that over the weekend. Well done. Well done. That was a good one. However, I need to emphasize this. There were some violations from the analog exam that is unacceptable for this class. I'm going to, for this first exam, it will be a warning. I won't be penalizing you for any violations. But however, it is very, very important you follow the instructions, the due process of the exam. Ensure no secondary device is around you while writing the exam, Your webcam should be visible. I check the recordings. I check the recordings of everyone for the entire exam process. For the first exam, I didn't state this before the exam. So for the first exam, I'll let this go. You won't be penalized for the first exam. Any violation again during the exam period for the second exam will not be tolerated. So please, it is very, very important. It is very, very important. We follow the due process for your exam, follow the instructions, ensure you're not, blocking your webcam, your videos is visible, no unauthorized accessories or devices around you when writing your exam. That's very important. And that will be all for today's class. Let me know if you have a question, any question. Um, on Thursday, we will be serving one of the labs. One of the your labs for lesson 5, and we will also talk about the nested lobes. Well, on Thursday, in detail, we'll talk about the nested lobes in detail on Thursday. So, if no question, sorry, tomorrow I will not be available for the virtual office hour for tomorrow. So, we'll meet next week, Wednesday. We'll continue our virtual office hour next week, Wednesday. If you have any question, please use the Canvas inbox, or you can, let me know. You can stay after the class and let's discuss if you have any question, or you use your inbox, Canvas inbox, to send your questions and any concerns you have about any concept or the class itself. If no questions, you're free to go. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you on Thursday. Trill, do you have any question? Jackson, any question?